record.
Hi everyone, my name is Wendy. I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, I'm Maya. I use she, her pronouns.
Hello, my name is Annalicia and I use she, her pronouns.
All right, well, we're excited to share our Crescent Loom project with you. For this assignment, we created a creature named Nervy, and through this project, we explored how a simple circuit of sensory, interneuron, and motor neuron connections can create complex coordinated behavior. So let's get started with Nervy's anatomy. Just from the top, Nervy has a brain, which is the control center for all its activity. This is where the neurons are housed and where all the sensory input gets processed before turning into a motor neuron. We gave Nervy two eyes for basic visual input. We like the idea of having bilateral visual awareness, and it really helps with symmetry of the body and detecting motion and upcoming obstacles from either side as Nervy makes his way along the course of the game. We also gave him six spinal segments connected to a wide plate. The plate acts almost like a stabilizer or back, and the spinal segments are where we attach most of the muscles, which are activated in patterns to create a wave like motion that moves Nervy forward. We also gave him a rigid spindle at the tail or at his tail to reduce drag and make Nervy's movement more fluid, especially because he's like an aquatic animal. We want him to be able to move smoothly. We also included four camouflage extensions, which were partially functional and partially aesthetic. They mimic the look of underwater kelp or seaweed, which we imagine might help Nervy with hiding from predators or sneaking up on others. And these don't move, but they add to the creature's marine theme. We gave him four jaws for biting in the fence and two smaller nibblers. The jaws were placed near the head and connected to motor neurons, which allowed Nervy to bite in response to certain stimuli. The nibblers don't do much damage, but they add detail and give the impression of a more complex mouth part, which is kind of like sensory feelers or backup chompers. We also gave him 15 total muscles along the spine for movement and a jet system located at the rear, and this part allows Nervy to burst forward when stimulated. So overall, Nervy's body has bilateral symmetry, meaning its left and right sides mirror each other. And as for behavior, we designed Nervy to have coordinated movement, defensive biting, and a rapid escape responses. The muscles along the spine fire in rhythmic waves thanks to our pacemaker neurons, which let it swim smoothly. And then sensory input like a touch or like touch can trigger the jaws to bite or the jet to activate. And we tried to give Nervy a balance of passive and active traits so it can either blend in or react quickly depending on the situation.
And now the circuit structure. So the brain includes two pacemaker somas connected to three muscle somas, and an adapter soma that connects to the jet muscle, and three sensory somas that connect to the pacemaker soma. And I'm going to show you our Nervy. All right. So Nervy's brain contains three types of neurons. And the green neurons, like the PAR, the PRO, and the KIT, are interneurons or pacemaker neurons. These fire rhythmic signals and are connected to each other in a way that creates oscillations. The red neurons, like ear, fry, and guy, are motor neurons. They activate muscles based on input from the pacemakers or sensory neurons. The blue or purple neurons, like fox, kid, and zip, are sensory neurons. These detect external stimuli, like touch or light. So we used reciprocal inhibition between some pacemaker neurons to produce alternating movement. This means that one neuron fires and inhibits the other, and then they switch. So this is great for swimming or flapping. The sensory neurons can activate either pacemakers or motor neurons directly, depending on what kind of response we want, like a bite, a turn, or a sudden jet movement. As well, how neurons generate activity. To get Nervy moving, we relied on three major neural mechanisms. Pacemaker neurons. These can fire on their own without any input, producing rhythmic activity that drives repetitive movement, like swimming, how our little Nervy is doing right now. Reciprocal inhibition. We connected pairs of neurons that inhibit each other. This creates a flip-flop firing pattern that helps Nervy's muscles alternate, like left or right movement. Okay. Sensory evoked activation. When a sensory neuron detects touch, it triggers other neurons in the circuit to respond. So for example, if Nervy bumps into something, it can bite, turn, or speed up in response.
For nervy cellular mechanisms, we know that crescent loom doesn't stimulate real molecular biology. We can still think about what might be happening at the cellular level, though. In Nervy's touch receptors, we'd expect to find mechanically gated ion channels like GRP channels. These open when the membrane is stretched or pressed, allowing sodium or calcium to enter the cell and depolarize the membrane. Here's how the signal would move through the circuit. 1. A touch deforms the membrane. 2. Mechanosensitive channels open. 3. Ions rush in and the neuron fires an action potential. 4. That neuron releases neurotransmitters, probably excitatory ones like glutamate, to the next neuron in the circuit. 5. The signal keeps going until it activates a motor neuron and causes movement. So if Nervy gets touched, it might speed up or bite depending on which neurons were triggered.
While we had a lot of fun creating our creature, we also want to be honest about the limitations of the Crescent Loom model and its software. One of the biggest challenges we faced was figuring out how to properly connect the sensory organs, like the eyes and the whiskers, to the right neurons. Even when we had them placed correctly on the body, it looked like it took a lot of trial and error to get them to actually trigger a response in the circuit. Another struggle was choosing which type of neuron to use for specific body parts. Crescent Loom gives you several neuron options, but not all of them work the way we expected. We spent a lot of time testing different combinations to find the right ones that would reliably stimulate the muscle and make Nervy move the way that we actually wanted him to. Also, since the platform doesn't let you simulate real-time sensory feedback or adaptive behavior, Nervy's responses always stay the same no matter what. That made it harder to show more complex or flexible behaviors like learning from repeated touch or adjusting to the environment over time. What a real organism would do to get around this would be actually adjusting to the stimuli, correction of the movements, and balance, which would lead to improved coordination. In a real world scenario, an organism would also have synaptic plasticity that would change over time, which simulates learning. Another shortcoming of this software is that it doesn't account for genetic code or hormones or even reproduction in Crescent Loom. I know this might not be a factor that we can deliberately control as far as what traits or creature inherits, but real world organisms would be able to navigate around this difficulty through genetic variation, natural selection, and probably some sort of adaptations. One final shortcoming that we had with this software was that we were confined to biological structures that were kind of simple compared to how advanced some organisms and like their organs and inside muscles and tissues might be in a real world organism. Even with those limitations, we learned a lot about how neural connections and feedback loops play a role in real behavior, and how even simple circuits can be surprisingly powerful when wired well.
So overall, building Nervy helped us better understand how neural circuits translate sensory input into motor output. Even with just a few neurons, we could create surprisingly realistic behavior. Being able to build Nervy's body and seeing what parts work together was also important to learning about muscles and how we can connect each muscle to a neuron to make it function properly.
Now we'll show a short demo of Nervy actually in action, the moment we've all been waiting for. You'll see how the spinal segments move rhythmically, how it reacts when touched, and how the jet propulsion kicks in.
And that pretty much makes up our presentation. So thank you for watching.
Thank you.